conversation, there was something very actually free. A social enterprise or a commercial, between a commercial venture or an impact planning to understand what exactly that is investor or social that brings me to what would be first conversation, and that would be to the how we experience that at the end. How would you describe a social potential or an impact potential?
Thanks a lot. Happy to be here. It's my first time in Lagos, so yeah, thanks everyone for showing up. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think I would define a social enterprise as any business that's looking to make a positive impact on society or the planet. And that could be both for-profit or non-profit businesses. And I think we should try to keep a pretty flexible and relatively loose definition of social enterprise generally. I think that we want to make sure that we encourage any business who has a mission alignment to try and create some positive change for society or the planet and be included within that. So,
we agree with that. The thing that we say imagine is that conversation here is broadly for impacts on those ventures, whether you're for-profit or for-profit. That's the thing that we're establishing here. So then what's beautiful collectives impact disease and what you look out for in assessing impacts on those ventures.
Sure, thank you. Can I see?
Yes, you can.
So at 54 Collective, ultimately we believe that African entrepreneurs are well positioned and the strongest vehicle for creating impact on the continent. So we have 5 impact priorities that we prioritize. And the first one is financial inclusion. So the fintechs or any sort of like integrated financial solution. We also have healthcare access, so improved healthcare outcomes and accessibility. Our third one is climate adaptation and resilience. And then our last 2 are kind of intertwined and sometimes overlap with the other priorities. But the fourth one is entrepreneurship and business growth. So a lot of B2B solutions that are supporting, SMEs or creating systems that are more efficient for SMEs would fall into that category. And our last category is dignified and fulfilling work. And that is a category that probably kind of falls into all of those in some way. But it's one that we place a lot of emphasis on. We want to understand how your solution is creating work opportunities for youth and for women, whether it's ad tech or a logistics company, or even like health tech usually has, or sometimes has some sort of pathway to work, whether it's improved or sustained or creative. So those are the 5 areas that we generally look at. But across all of those areas, we have 2 specific lenses that we look through. So we want to see how you're creating opportunities or lowering the barrier for youth. So young people are one of the biggest segments that are employed by SMEs. And obviously there's a lot of unemployment here. So that's an area that's really high priority for us. And then the second lens is gender. So those are kind of the things that we look at when we're assessing a business at the DD stage or before DD. I'm happy to expand, but I can refer back to.
Yeah, we'll get to that very shortly. And then as an extension of that, how is this different from the traditional model? How does it balance the elements that we expect?
So I think first I'll just give a brief definition of what impact investing is, just on top of what Jordan has already said. Impact investing at the end of the day is still an investment, so returns are expected. But unlike traditional investing, where it's just financial returns that are the main objective of that investment type, impact investing still expects financial returns, but in addition, it also expects, some sort of social or environmental impact as an outcome. So looking at the differences between the 2, one is the objective, which I've already said. For traditional investments, the objective is just purely financial returns. For impact investments, the objective is both financial returns as well as social or environmental positive outcomes. So things around sustainability, health, financial inclusion, education, like impact investing also expects outcomes from the enterprises, outcomes along these verticals from the enterprises. Then two is the types of investors. So traditional investors are different. There are all sorts. There are VC investors like Israel Collective. There are PE investors. There are institutional investors. There are corporate investors, etc. For impact investing, the investors are different. Sometimes they overlap, but you have BFIs, you have foundations, you still have some venture capital firms that also lean towards impact, again, like it's for collective. And yeah, so those are the types of investors differ, their objectives differ, their risk appetite is also different. So with impact investors, they tend to be a bit more patient because they are really trying to drive sustainable growth and really achieve impact. And sometimes impact takes way longer to achieve than just financial returns. But traditional investors, sometimes their capital tends to be less patient, even if it still is patience, because particularly those investing in emerging markets still just need time for a lot to come up. Then, so we have the objectives, the investor types, the risk appetite. We also have measurements, so outcome measurements. For traditional investors, they are really just after how you're reporting on your financials, your financial growth, and that's really what they are measuring. But for impact investors, they are measuring the impact. So they are even using other things like using SDGs, they have ESG frameworks. So like they're really trying to track the impact in addition to the financial metrics. So those are some of the differences.
Interesting that you mentioned SQ because that takes us into the next question to begin to get to very practical examples. But before that, Jordan, I'm already referring to SQ. NTG is one of the conventional framework. How can startups and ventures articulate their impact also to demonstrate that their businesses can provide and produce sustainable pathway for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first off, the SDGs are a great place to start in there. I think that what the SDGs created was really a common framework and goalpost for a lot of companies to align with their business models and the specific impact they aim to achieve. So it's a starting point. But I think as the impact investing space has evolved globally in the last 5 years, especially, more investors are asking questions about what else. So how can you showcase that impact beyond just the SDGs? And I think there are a number of additional frameworks that entrepreneurs can look into, try to showcase that impact. The best one I would say, maybe I'm a little biased because we use it, but it's Impact Frontiers. It's an awesome practitioner-oriented framework that helps entrepreneurs identify the impact they create along 5 dimensions. So there's the who, what, how much, contribution, and risk dimensions. Everything is available on the website. There's some guidance there as well. It helps companies essentially understand what outcomes they're contributing towards and how they can articulate the specific customers that they're serving and trying to change their livelihoods or benefit them. Or if it's an environmental focused business, make a real difference positively to the climate. And also what I like about it is that that framework in particular has a risk component. So we talked a little bit about ESG, and I think sometimes entrepreneurs are maybe a bit confused about the differences between ESG and impact. To me, the clear difference and what I like about the Impact Frontiers framework is that it helps entrepreneurs understand ways to mitigate potential negative risks that may occur due to the business. And really understand how they can quantify and measure the positive impact that their business is creating. So yeah, I think the Impact Frontiers framework is an excellent place to start. And if entrepreneurs can go through that and articulate it to investors, it will help them out a lot, genuinely in conversations when they're getting into those spaces, even going beyond just having the SDGs that they align.
Thank you. Just adding to that, that's a very helpful recommendation for anyone who's really keen on establishing a portfolio business. Impact Frontiers is please to look out for. But there are well-established guidelines, frameworks in the impact investment ecosystem or within the system, enterprise ecosystem. The Global Impact Investment Network is also another place to look out for. The GIN, how it's referred to, so the de facto global body for impact investing, and they have a framework called Iris Plus Metrics against stimulus there. This is a very extensive sort of catalog of metrics. So whatever business you're doing, you can go to any of this, look through the themes that are aligned for you, look at the relevant metrics, and there is clear guideline on how to work through that, how to articulate that for your business. So that brings us to the next thing, which is very practical examples, right? What does this really mean for a portfolio company or a business of person? So we know start with you to share, to talk us through the case study of the business, highlighting the impact cases, how we articulated that into impact metrics, and how that was very valuable for them through the fundraising process.
Yeah, so I guess about naming the name.
Oh, sure. We don't know.
Yeah, so generally when we bring business in at the due diligence stage, we're already kind of assessing what the potential pathway to impact will be, and we'll create a theory of change, which is kind of how we outline like what activities does this business do, like what are the outcomes that we're expecting, what are the short-term outcomes, and then what are the medium to long-term outcomes. And that ultimately informs the metrics that we essentially use to measure their impact. And so just off the top of my head, one business we can go with a health tech business. This business aggregates orders from PPMPs, which are community pharmacies. And they aggregate these orders in order to connect them to suppliers in order to bring their price down. So it makes quality healthcare more accessible because these PPMPs are now able to actually afford drugs that are well vetted and not counterfeit, et cetera. But then also because these PPMPs are independent, they're able to ensure that these drugs are more readily available. They're not sold out regularly, et cetera, in these communities, as opposed to maybe like the Med Plus, for example, that's more expensive and they can't afford it. So when I think about this business, coming in, the pathway to impact is that because we're aggregating orders between these smaller pharmacies and PPMPs, you're able to, okay, so let me think. Okay, so we're aggregating these orders. You're ensuring that it's more affordable for the PPMPs, so they're able to supply these drugs more regularly. And so on the PPMP side, you are enabling them to grow their businesses because they're supplying their shops more affordably. They're not having to turn down customers as much because their supply is consistent. But then on the community side, you're ensuring that these drugs are more readily available, they're more affordable. And then because these drugs are more available, people are able to treat like these illnesses, malaria, even just like body pain, whatever it is. They're able to treat it more quickly, more affordably, and then that'll ultimately have implications for how like health outcomes for this community. So when we think about this business, we've identified these areas, and so those are kind of the framework, I guess, for how we identify the metrics. So we want to know the number of PPMVs that are like onboarded and use this business. We want to know like how many are women owned. We want to know how many are youth owned. We also want to know like what is the volume of drugs that they're selling, what kinds of drugs are they selling, et malaria drugs? Is it like painkillers? Is it some sort of like fungal, what are they called? Antibiotics. So we're trying to understand, okay, what kind of drugs are they selling? Because that kind of has implications for what illnesses are, I guess, like plaguing or troubling these communities. On the PPMV side, we want to know like how much is this business growing in terms of like the sales that they're able to make? Because what we were hearing a lot during the due diligence stage is that aside the fact that they can't afford these drugs, there's so many times we were speaking to them one-on-one, there's so many times where a customer will come and they want to buy like anti-malarial drugs. And because they don't have it available, they have to tell them, oh, just go to the next store over. And that was a consistent issue they had. They're also having to go and close shop to buy these drugs. So considering all these things and the efficiency that this solution is bringing, how is this business enabling them to grow? And based on like the growth of these pharmacies, what is this contributing to their ability to hire more people? Because then that implies like how many jobs they're creating, et cetera. So of course I've named so many different metrics, but because we're able to like identify the framework that we're measuring, they're then able to like clearly identify the specific metrics that they're measuring on a monthly or quarterly basis. And then they're able to kind of, I guess, articulate their impact regularly. And I think beyond that, so beyond like the numbers, it's really important to have like case studies and like anecdotal examples of how this, how the impact is being created for this business. And so considering all these things, they're able to do this on a regular basis, and we're obviously able to support them and equip them with this. And then over time, like now we're at the stage where we're supporting them to like neatly package like their impact story into a deck that they're able to then share with key stakeholders. And because they've already been intentional from the very beginning, I forgot to add that this is a concept stage business. So they're pre-revenue when we met them, et cetera. They're in our Gen F initiative. But because they were so intentional about identifying like the impact potential at the very beginning, it's relatively easy for them to measure over time. And so they're able to articulate it very clearly because they've already been measuring it. They've already put the measures in place to ensure that when they're onboarding the customer, they're not only onboarding the customer, but they know like what their gender is, they know what their age is, they know where they're located. They ensure that as they're collecting data, they know like what drugs are being sold and they're actually monitoring that. So all of these things make it a lot more easy and a lot more seamless to communicate that.
Thank you very much. That was very detailed, and I hope it was helpful to tying this to the previous conversation we're having about reference guidelines and frameworks. If you go to the GENE platform, for instance, and you go to the healthcare section, you see a number of things. So the business that open works on schools, the healthcare business where follows maybe two broad things like access to medicines and vaccines. So that is already a thing. And if you click that on the platform, you then see relevant metrics that are being developed already. So for instance, the number of patients reached, a number of patients by geography or by demographic. So there are already templates that help you walking through the starting point from where you are to the kind of example she had given. That takes us to Anna's question, get an extension of that. From an investment perspective, you give us an example of the company that has passed on funds that has been invested by BfE, and how do places balance impact consideration with financial consideration?
Okay. Maybe I'll start with your last question first and then close out with the company. So when VCs are thinking about impacts, we think about it through all of the phases. So starting from our investment thesis, to our due diligence process, to our portfolio management, and then even to our exit mapping. So in our investment thesis, when passing our investment thesis, we very included there that we are also impact focused. So of course, as a VC, we're definitely after financial returns, but it's not every business that gives financial returns that also gives impact returns. So we include it in our investment thesis that are very particular about impact returns too. And this is have different ways of doing it. There could be some could take the financial first approach, some could take the impact first approach, although this is mostly financial first approach, but there would also be impact. So that's one in the investment thesis. Then two is in our due diligence process. When assessing the company, as we are assessing on the financial side, trying to understand what's the market size, what's competitive landscape, what are the limited markets, what's the traction, all of the financial due diligence. We would also be assessing the impact side too. So all of the things that when we said many of them happen at digital stage, actually, not as we had invested in the company. So we're already looking out for all of these metrics from the stage, and they need to tell a clear story the same way financial story needs to make sense for us to have a very strong investment case. There have even been cases where there were companies with very strong financial cases, but the impact story was really weak and we passed on opportunities just because of that. So that's how we embed it in our due diligence phase. And then in the portfolio management phase too, as we're providing support to these companies across multiple areas, we also take into consideration impact. So we provide support to companies in a number of ways. Many of these companies were VCs, so of course, many of our investments are super early stage businesses. So they might not even have a reporting framework generally. I'm talking about even the financial one. So as we're thinking of, what are the financial metrics that are important for this business to track, so that we help them with even creating templates, walking them through so that they are able to have their financials in check. We would also be doing that on the impact side. So Opemi also mentioned things like that. A lot of those metrics that we're looking out for during the due diligence phase, she helps put them into the templates to help these companies so that they're actually tracking this during the portfolio management phase. Part of portfolio management is follow-on investment opportunities. So beyond the time we invest, we want this company to keep growing, we need to keep raising capital. So as we are thinking of, if we invested in a pre-seed business, we're thinking of how do we get this business to seed stage, who are seed investors that we can introduce this business to. We would also be thinking, this business is very well positioned, has a very strong impact story too. So what are the grant funding? What grant funding is available to this business? How do we build this business to that? So supporting them as well. And just various other aspects when we're thinking about strategy for this business, different things as we're thinking about it from the financial side, we're also thinking about it on the impact side too. So portfolio management, we're also supporting. And then even as we support this business through to the exit stages, we make sure that all of this impact that is being recorded over time ties into the exit story of this business, so that when business is exiting, it is not only seen as a very strong financial company, but it's seen as a really sustainable business that is generating a lot of impact. And that just poses a wider range, a wider and stronger range of exit opportunities for the business. So that's how that's how we do that, balance it out. And then examples of
Just for an example. An example of portfolio company, you can reference what they do for everyone to work, right? Just to give everyone some concept.
Yeah. Okay. So I believe you're referring to a portfolio company that has really done all of that impact side.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. So one of them that's our reference is one of our companies in Kenya through Canada. What they do is that they are a marketplace for the creative and handmade industry. So creative and handmade goods across the aggregate creative and handmade goods, we're thinking furniture, clothing, like all these handmade things, jewelry, even skincare products. So these products tend to be very sustainable. So they aggregate these products from local makers in emerging markets, starting from Kenya, other parts of Africa, and then they spread to other emerging markets in Latin, etc. So they aggregate these goods and then they tie them, they connect them to large retailers in the US. So large retailers like TK Maxx, large retailers like Sainsbury's, etc. So big furniture stores. So that's what they do. And they provide other supporting services, as most marketplaces do, financing, logistics. So it has really given the local bead makers in Kenya the opportunity to have their things being sold in some of the biggest retail stores in the US, in Canada, in Europe. And it is driving a lot of impact because they're also aggregating. It significantly drives down logistics costs, and then they really help them with export readiness. So the business has been able to drive a lot of impact. They are now at I think they have over 100,000 makers of the platform now. Significant work that they are doing there. They're looking to raise their Series B. They've raised, in addition to, I mentioned Series B because clearly they've raised a lot of follow-on VC funding. But in addition to all of that, they've also raised a lot of impact funding too. And that's part of what has really helped the business get to where it is today. As at last year, I think they raised like over 500K from IFU. So that's
where I could have been a better example, more perfect example. And I asked her so that we can get something else that is further away from healthcare to demonstrate that across different industry sectors and both, you can clearly communicate your impact area. And so the theme on impact ministers that this company could probably fall under the implementing the operation, right? And then we have walked through that to figure out what the measurable metrics that are relevant for them are, and they'll be consistent with that, and they can report that to their investors. And so for those on the investing side, it's a clear marker for them, a clear indicator of how that company checks past consideration. So again, I hope there's one thing we're going as or whatever businesses we're doing, you can walk through translating the business objectives in outcomes, especially if there are actually tangible outcomes, right? To make sure it speaks the better language, if that's the right way. So it starts with being clear about its intentionality, using the frameworks available. And that is something very last case study by Jordan to tell us to begin one to hear from everyone in their different flavors. Share an example of the social enterprise range of advances and walk us through what has been there in the past.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, one I'll share is a Rwandan company called Bag Innovation that we supported in 2019, 2020. They went through our incubation program. They're an ed tech startup, and they actually came to us. They were founded in 2017, so they came to us with a little bit of a solid understanding already of the impact that they create. And by that, I mean they already had developed a theory of change, so they had some clarity on their impact strategy. And that made it a little bit easier for us to then understand and work with them on creating some metrics because they had that initial clarity set up. They understood how the activities that they do contribute to the positive impact they create. So Bag Innovation in general is the startup that helps companies essentially hire trained talent, and they're trying to reduce friction in the labor market in Rwanda and across the African continent. And they've worked with over 500 companies to hire top talent And on the student side, they're really focused on upskilling talent. So trying to help them develop skills that are career ready. So after graduation, that they know that they can get a job that's also sustainable, that they can be employed there for hopefully a long period of time. And what we did during the consulting and finance advisory engagement that we worked with them on over a 6 to 8 month process was helping them identify the specific metrics that make sense for them to track. So for example, for them, they were, before they arrived to the incubation program, they hadn't actually collected any data to showcase what the sort of medium term or long term impact of the students were employed at the employers on their platform looked like. So for example, were they increasing their income? Were they feeling more confident in their skills? Were they gaining new confidence or dignity? These types of metrics they hadn't really focused on collecting before, and they didn't have a proper monitoring dashboard set up to do so. So that's something, for example, that we work with them on. And they have gone on to raise grant money. They actually were awarded in 2021 as the top EdTech in Africa by the African Union. They won the West Africa Challenge back in 2020. So they've gone on to be pretty successful. I think their fundraising track record is not as strong, but they're still doing quite well. And we're happy to see that. And I think the impact story is really strong for them, especially if they look at things like classifying the impact they create along different categories. So for them, it's about impact duration. So what is the medium or long-term outcome that the students are able to achieve after having been employed at the employers originally on the back innovation platform?
Thank you. And that's again another example, right, of a very different kind of business or venture. An important thing you didn't mention is data collection, because that's how you translate whatever information or whatever story you're trying to communicate into these metrics. But the relevance of even being clear about that story is that then you know the metrics to measure and you know what that would mean for your platform. So if, for instance, you know, require some bigger data from a personal profile information, whether they're female, male, whatever that is, or their age group, if you determine the unique metrics along those lines, then you can go back to the platform and begin to include that. But the starting point is to be clear about what these metrics are. They can walk you through what is required, what sort of changes you need to make to your platform. Maybe there are even data you already have, but you're not very familiar, you've not paid attention, then you can expand down to information from it. So again, I hope if there is one thing we're leaving you with, that whatever the sector or whatever the industry is, you not just to provide clarity for the stakeholders, you also position your business better for investors who are in the investing space. And then in there are responsive framework and guidance to walk you through that journey. And so that brings us to the last round of questions. And maybe start with you, Jordan. One of the platforms is already mentioned about considers a framework, but there are all the relevant resources out there to share and mention, just share one last recommendation or one feedback for any business who's on this journey.
Yeah, there's a couple I could share. I'll
Right.
look for two. So I think one that's really entrepreneur focused, if you're starting out your journey and trying to define and clarify the impact strategy, is to look at the impact measurement and management toolkit from Social Finance Academy. It's a free 50+ page guide that goes through a 5-step phased approach to developing an IMM, impact measurement and management system, and walking entrepreneurs through developing a theory of change, to collecting data, to disaggregating that data along key socio-demographic factors, for example, and to managing, analyzing that data, and then finally reporting the impact data that's collected to key internal and external stakeholders. So it's a really holistic overview of how to develop an IMM system. Then secondly, I would also point to Ventures at the Helm, which is a fantastic guide, again, freely available online. That's for, I would say, more commercially mature businesses, maybe that have already raised investment. The guide is designed to help entrepreneurs and investors navigate the impact measurement journey together. Because it's really a partnership, trying to understand how the venture capital firms or investors in general try to partner with the companies to find metrics that make sense for both parties from a business perspective and also from an investment perspective. And the guide has practical toolkits that are available as well. So those are also nice exercises to go through as maybe investors and entrepreneurs together. So those are the two that I would point to.
Thank you. I hope that's helpful for somebody there. And again, the emphasis there is to ensure accurate representation of whatever it is the company about your business. And so that puts us to Amy's question, how do businesses ensure transparency while trying to make it compelling case, and then it kind of looks for feedback, whatever it is you want to do.
Sure, thank you. In terms of ensuring transparency, I think that it all kind of boils down to like the data that you're collecting and like the data integrity. So when you're thinking about that transparency, really understanding, I guess, like who your target customer is and like how you communicate that. Because for example, if you're like B2B, you say like small businesses, maybe if we dig deeper, we'll get like, I don't know, like the sales or like the revenue of like a specific business that's using your solution. We might, I don't know, decide that maybe it's not a small business. So being able to like clearly communicate who the customers are, even if there's like different segmentation, because I think that informs the impact that will be created across the different segments. And I think another thing is like, as you're thinking about like your impact goals and the impact that your business intends to create, I think it's really important to pretty much collect data that actually validates that. So for example, we might have a business come in and say, our solution is very efficient. We save our customers 10% on costs, I don't know, every year, every month. And so an obvious next question for us would be, like, what proof do you have of that? Like, what data are you using to validate that you're actually saving those costs? Do you have a case study that you can share with us? And I guess a disclaimer is that we obviously start at concept stage. So a business that doesn't have any customers and any revenue might not have a case study. But in those cases, it's really important for the founder to understand, I guess, like the pain point that those customers are facing. So in as much as you don't necessarily have to prove today that your solution is going to save them 10%, you have an idea of maybe like what they're paying for this specific service and like what you intend to charge, maybe the time that you intend to save, or like any sort of like associated costs with whatever you're solving for. So I think that that's also really important. And I think maybe the last thing is just thinking about like impact washing and like embellishing the impact that you're creating just by virtue of being like an entrepreneur on the continent, solving like these really difficult problems and all the inefficiencies that we have here. Like there really is a lot of opportunity to create impact. So I think it's just important to be clear and like direct in the impact that you intend to create. Be honest about what you're collecting, understand the gaps that there are in terms of like the data you're collecting. So if you intend to support, I don't know, women-owned SMEs, it's obviously important to ensure that when you're onboarding your customers that you are collecting that data so that later you can say 40% of our businesses are SMEs, and of these women-owned businesses that we supported, we saw, I don't know what the solution is, if it's like a B2B logistics, maybe you save them 40% in cost on like transporting their goods. But I think it's important to be like very intentional about like what you're collecting, just so that when you're communicating it, it's obvious like the impact that you're creating. It's obvious that like the data is clean, it's transparent, etc. So yeah, I would say that that should kind of sum up the question and be like my advice at the same time.
Thank you. And can you share how entrepreneurs can build deeper relationships with investors and be able to attract this local and institutional capital and also include your last year, so advisory contribution.
Okay, those are three questions in one. Okay, the first is how entrepreneurs can build
Build
relationships.
relationships and attract staff.
So the second is
Find out what's relevant.
development.
Find out what's relevant.
Okay, so I'll say, I think we mentioned something around how they can practice.
Contracts, yeah.
All right, so I would say I'll answer the first and second question together, which is how entrepreneurs can build relationships as well as how they can attract impact investing. So the very first thing is that entrepreneurs really need to build really solid businesses with solid business models. So that's the best thing. That's what you're selling to an investor. So if you're building a relationship with an investor, it's because you're speaking my language, and my language is you have a solid business, it's a solid business model. And this applies to every type of investor, be it a VC investor that is just solely focused on financial returns, or even an impact investor, because even for impact investors, they are interested in financial returns too. And they are also interested in sustainable businesses. There is no impact investor that wants to be putting money in a business that will constantly need grants to survive. Impact investors need sustainable businesses. So your business needs to be solving a really strong problem, and you need to be solving that problem in a really large market. The potential needs to be huge. And then how you're going about your business, you should have strong unit economics, like every other thing should be unlocked. Like it needs to be a really strong business. Then the second is to understand how to approach investors. And the first thing is investors are data driven. So Femi alluded to lots of things that when you're coming to investors, you need to have all this your data, but you're transparent with the right things, of course. So if you're trying to attract impact investors, she has mentioned a lot of frameworks that are already in existence, where you can see the different metrics that your type of business model can track. So if you're trying to attract impact investors, you need to build out that your impact narrative, and you need to use data to do that. So there are many businesses that when I speak to, they would have given a lot of thought around the financials, they're talking through their unit economics, and then because they know Fiscal Collective is also impact focused, they then just throw things like, oh, we're going to drive financial inclusion, or we're going to do this. I'm like, okay, how are you going to drive financial inclusion? You're building a product that's not for the unbanked. You're building a product like the product you're building, what segments of the population is that product being targeted at? Even if it is for the banks, is it like, how is it financially including me? So they're not able to explain their impact narrative. And of course, they don't have any data to back things up. Some people can just throw out figures, but when you now ask them the how, they are not able to say it. So part of investment readiness is really having your data, your information, have it all, and your clear storytelling. The way you're crafting out your storytelling on the financial side, you also need to have a clearly crafted out impact story and impact pathway that you're building. Then the third would be to identify the right types of investors for you, the right types of impact investors. Like many other investors, some impact investors have sector focus, they have market focus. There are some that just focus on healthcare, some that just focus on education. If you're building a fintech and you go to a healthcare impact investor, some are focused on specific markets, specific geographies. And then some are focused on certain stages. Some might also be more passionate about, less about the sector, but maybe more about gender equality. So they really want to see that you're driving inclusion for women. Some are really focused on poverty alleviation. Some are really focused on food sustainability. So you need to understand your business and then map out the right types of investors for your business so that you're reaching out to investors is super tailored and you're received well from the get-go. Another point is to capitalize on strong partnerships. So investors, no investor likes to invest alone. And a great stamp of credibility on your business is when you have another investor already in you. So be it that you attended some accelerator program somewhere, or you have partnered with a corporate to do something, or you have actually received funding from any type of investor at all, go through those guys to your target impact investor rather than going directly to your target impact investor yourself. So that's another way. And then, by the time you do have the audience of these investors, just be super sharp, be super clear with your message. And investors are after returns. So you need to map out how you are going to use the money, how you're going to generate those returns. So I think even for the third question of advice, this also covers it.
Thank you so much. I hope we can right practical references at least across all the case studies you had. Actionable recommendations, but the guidelines of frameworks such that wherever you are in that journey, there's something very practical that you can choose with your business. Thank you for joining me and very valuable conversation.